Okay, I just clicked the got it button. Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope you slept well and you have had a good breakfast and feel energetic and you have a good Sunday. This morning, I'm going to begin with a quote from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya. That's in the Pali Canon. That is the great passing of the Buddha. It purports to cover his last months and days, and it's in the collection known as the Long Discourses, Digha Nikaya. Quote, and the Lord, meaning the Buddha, the Pali would be Bhagawa, and the Lord said to Ananda, Ananda, it may be that you think the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be like this, Ananda. For what I have taught and explained to you as Dhamma and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher, unquote. In this source, we see that the Buddha didn't set up or even suggest a pope-like person or authoritarian institution to perpetuate his instruction. He would continue in his instruction, the Dharma, and the behavioral guidance, the Vinaya or discipline, that were there for his followers to study and apply. However, he did create a Sangha, an assembly or community wherein Buddhists could support and teach each other, relying on the Dharma. So there is no authoritarian pontiff, but there are teachers, many of whom have made all the difference in many Buddhist lives. These teachers are perpetuators of the Dharma and have existed throughout Buddhist history. We are lucky today to have many fine teachers in the US and around the world in all the Buddhist traditions, and teachers who are lay and monastic, male and female, traditional and non-traditional, elder generations and younger generations, etc. And many are accessible nowadays by Zoom. For example, this Zoomed retreat is sponsored by the Yin-Shun Foundation that focuses on the teachings of Master Yin-Shun, a very scholarly monk whose work has spurred a reform movement in Chinese Buddhism. Our situation today is in marked contrast to the situation when I was young in the US many decades ago. There were almost no meditation teachers, and contact with other Buddhists was very rare. I was in suburban Pittsburgh, but I had to correspond with a member of the Buddhist Society in far-off London, England, and later a Buddhist in Philadelphia, as well as the Japanese American Pure Land Buddhist Churches of America in far-off San Francisco. In Washington, D.C. at that time, there was only the Washington Friends of Buddhism. So in those days, there wasn't much. Things began to change with the writings of D.T. Suzuki and the appearance of beatniks, coffee house Zen, and the so-called Dharma bums, especially on the West Coast. The first meditation teachers were a very few Japanese Buddhists on the West Coast. Then in the 1960s, there was a big burst of interest in Buddhism, partially prompted by the hippies, the arrival of the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans in India in 1959, interest in Japanese and other Asian cultures, especially art and architecture, food. Some Americans went to India and Southeast Asia and learned insight, vipassana, meditation, etc., and others to study with the Tibetans up in Dharamsala. And all of this developed during the 20-year-long Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. I am a Vietnam era veteran. It was in the context of the Vietnam War that an amazing monastic teacher appeared. His name was Thich Nhat Hanh. His students, friends, and many others called him Thay, T-H-A-Y, Thay, which means master or teacher in Vietnamese. Now, I think that everyone or almost everyone here has heard of Thay and perhaps read some of his books, attended his lectures. I attended 4 or meditated at one of his centers or with one of his groups. He died on January 22nd this year, a little over 5 months ago. And perhaps some of you were able to watch his death ceremonies in Vietnam, in France, and in the US on Zoom, as well as his cremation and 49th day ceremony. If you missed these events, by the way, and you want to see them, you can go to the Mindfulness Bell website and click on Memorial Services. You can see many hours of the ceremonies that took so much time. It was all profoundly, deeply moving. Thay told us that we are like clouds. And he said, quote, "A cloud never dies," unquote, but it transforms into fog, rain, snow, etc. And so it continues in transformation. The rain falls, is absorbed into the ground, the roots of the plants pick it up, then it moves up through the plant, and then it is absorbed into the sky, and then it starts all over again. He would continue, he said, in how we perpetuate his teaching in our mindfulness, our walking, our breathing, our active compassion. However, although you may know about him, I think few know that his skillful teaching and efforts to renew Buddhism were influenced by none other than Master Yin-Shun. As Buddhist scholar Sally B. King said, the Venerable Yin-Shun was one of Thay's inspirations. So to look at the life and teaching of Thay is also one way to look at some influence of Master Yin-Shun's teaching and how his teaching, like a pebble dropped in water, emanates out and influences others. Thay was not just a good and effective teacher. He was an extraordinary Buddhist teacher, known around the world, second in fame only to the Dalai Lama. Professor King sums his achievements up very succinctly. Thay was a poet, peacemaker, and prolific author, one of the most beloved and globally influential religious leaders to come from the Buddhist world in the 20th and 21st centuries. A spiritual giant of our time. His words, deeds, and approach to the spiritual life spoke to people of all nationalities and religions. Perhaps more than anyone else, he had a gift for taking the most profound teachings of Buddhism and expressing them in simple, widely accessible language. With over 130 books he wrote, translated into 40 languages, numbering tens of millions of sales worldwide, and the energetic new Buddhist monastic and lay community he founded, the Order of Interbeing, in Vietnamese something like Thiep Yin, order. His influence lives on, part of his continuation as he taught after the death of his body. To better understand Thay's teachings, let's look briefly at his life. Thai's life was profoundly influenced by war. The French, after the French colonialism, and then the Japanese occupation of Vietnam, there was the first Indochina War against the French, who tried to reestablish empire. That was from 1946 to 1954. And it resulted in the division of Vietnam into North Vietnam and South Vietnam. Then came the 20-year-long Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. Those of us who are of age remember that very well. Thai was born in 1926 and became a novice monk at the Tu Hieu Temple in Hue, Vietnam, when he was 16 years old. There he was taught both the Theravada and Mahayana traditions. He pursued more advanced studies at Bao Quoc Buddhist Academy, and later he earned a BA in French and Vietnamese literature at Saigon University. He became a published poet, author, and editor. In 1957, his efforts to contribute to a renewed humanistic Buddhism took a practical turn when he and friends founded a Buddhist monastic community, Huang Boi, an intentional community in a remote location in order to try out a new form of Buddhist community life with a great deal of freedom and spontaneity. In 1962-63, Thai accepted a Fulbright fellowship and studied religion at Princeton University and lectured on Buddhism at Columbia and Cornell universities. He then returned to Vietnam and worked with others to found and lecture at Van Han Buddhist University. Professor King notes that this fulfilled Thai's ambition to open Buddhist education to fresh ideas. He founded a publishing house and edited the weekly journal of the Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam. The print media allowed him to present fresh Buddhist ideas and publish works advocating for peace. Thai was a lifelong advocate of nonviolence and fundamentally rejected the idea that any peoples should be enemies to each other. As he wrote in a poem titled, "Do Not Shoot Your Brother," quote, "Our enemy is hatred, inhumanity, anger, ideology. Our enemy is not man. If we kill man, with whom shall we live?" Unquote. The Buddhist anti-war movement, in which Thai was a leader, promoted the idea of a third way, siding with neither North nor South Vietnam, but with life. Thai founded the School of Youth for Social Services, SYSS, that trained young people to go into the rural areas to create schools, and the students worked with the poor, evacuating villages in the line of fire, rebuilding destroyed villages, assisting with agriculture, and helping the injured and orphans, while carefully avoiding taking sides with either of the warring parties. In this work, the SYSS exemplified engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism, by the way, is a term that Thai coined, a Buddhism involved with social and political life. For him, engaged Buddhism was the unity of spiritual practice and compassionate action, sort of like Buddhist Global Relief or Jitsu Foundation. It was never the dropping of spiritual practice for the sake of action. That's very important, not dropping the practice of spirituality for the action. Oh, I can do the spirituality tomorrow because I have to do the action today. Tay made sure that they combined the two. He made sure that the students combined these in their activities in the rural areas. Thai said, If you don't have a spiritual practice, you can't survive their work in social justice. I might note that this understanding was similar to the great Catholic Cistercian monk, Thomas Merton, one of my models, whom Thay met in 1966 at Merton's Gethsemane Monastery in Kentucky. Merton wrote in his book, Contemplation in a World of Action, what is the relation of this contemplation, spirituality, to action? Simply this: he who attempts to act and do things for others or for the world without deepening his own self-understanding, freedom, integrity, and capacity to love will not have anything to give others. He will communicate to them nothing but the contagion of his own obsessions, his aggressiveness, his ego-centered ambitions, his delusions about means and ends, his doctrinaire prejudices and ideas. Merton was the novice master at Gethsemane for a while, and at that time he used Thay as an example of a fully formed monk. High praise indeed. As a matter of fact, I used to have a cassette tape with an hour-long session of the novice of Merton as the novice master, and for that full hour, he talked only about Thich Nhat Hanh. Merton called Thay his brother. As a matter of fact, he's quoted on the back of one of Thay's books, Living Buddha, Living Christ. Thich Nhat Hanh is more my brother than many are nearer to me in race and nationality, because he and I see things the exact same ways. Thay had a skill at crossing ecumenical boundaries. In 1964, Thay also founded his new Buddhist order, the Order of Interbeing. This became the institutional home for his renewed form of Buddhism. It was and is a community for both monastics and lay people, focused on the practice of mindfulness and compassionate action in the world, and based on a deep understanding of the interdependence of all existence, which Thay called interbeing. He created this new term, interbeing. We inter-are, something inter-is, everything is inter. Now note that I've just mentioned things that are the three fundamentals of his thought and work: mindfulness, compassionate action, and interbeing. Very important. You understand these three, you understand what he said, what he did. Today, this order is headquartered at Plum Village in southwestern France, and it is the largest Buddhist monastic community in the West. It houses about 200 monastics and welcomes about 10,000 visitors a year. Worldwide, the order consists of 11 monasteries, several in the United States, and practice centers, and hundreds of local Sangha communities. In 1966, Thay was invited to travel and speak in the West. And the message that he delivered to the United States during this tour was published in his 1967 in his important book about the war, Vietnam, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. This is my copy, which I got as soon as it was published. He wrote that it would be impossible for Americans to win the war. At this time, Martin Luther King Jr., whom Thay had met, nominated Thay for the Nobel Peace Prize. In his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, Martin Luther King said, Thich Nhat Hanh is a holy man, for he is humble and devout. He is a scholar of immense intellectual capacity. His ideas for peace, if applied, would build a monument to ecumenism, to world brotherhood, to humanity. That's Martin Luther King. In 1975, Thay wrote The Miracle of Mindfulness, another book It's published many times, reprinted, and has different covers. This is the second print. It's a practice manual for his SYSS students. It was then translated into English for Western friends who had requested it. These friends were social justice workers. The book introduced many people to the practice of mindfulness. It has been the first meditation book of many practitioners. After the war, the Vietnamese government forbade Thai's return to Vietnam. He then established Plum Village in southern France as the headquarters of the Order of Interbeing. And he continued his activism from there. He worked extensively in the healing of psychological and spiritual wounds of the veterans of all sides. He taught would-be peacemakers that they needed to be peace in order to make peace. Let me repeat that. They needed to be peace in order to make peace. Think of the saying attributed to Gandhi: be the change you want to see in the world. Very famous. Gandhi didn't quite say it, but it's attributed to him. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thai held retreats for policemen, politicians, teachers, social workers, artists, families, and retreats in which Palestinians and Israelis were invited to practice together. In all these retreats, mindfulness was the skill that was offered. This was the form that his engaged Buddhism took after the war years. He said it was a Buddhism for everyday life. To promote mindfulness and other teachings, he also founded Parallax Press, or he co-founded Parallax Press in Berkeley, California. He did that in 1986. Now, after 39 years in exile, Thai was able to return to Vietnam for visits beginning in 2005 and to teach publicly while there. In 2014, he suffered a severe stroke and became unable to speak. In 2018, he finally returned to live at his root temple, Tu Hieu, temple in Hue. That was where he lived his final years until he died this past January. Regarding the character of his teaching, as Professor King notes, one of the greatest of Thai's contributions was his expression of experiential worldview that was faithful to Buddha's teachings, yet radically new. A worldview that spoke to the lives of lay people and the sensibilities of the modern world. Thai often said, the traditional expression, Buddhism has 84,000 Dharma doors. That is, forms in which Buddhism can be taught, and that we must open even more. She pointed out to a Dharma talk that Thai gave on July 25th, 1991, wherein Thai said there are two ways of viewing impermanence. We can view it pessimistically as what robs life of value. We die. Everyone we know, love dies. We all die. Everybody's doing it. We get sick. We may lose money. We may find ourselves in war. We may have an accident and become an invalid, etc. Or on the other hand, we see it as what makes life possible, since all things arise as the result of causal actions and conditions of other things. This is entirely true and unarguable on the basis of Buddhist teachings. Yet somehow many Buddhist traditions focus on the pessimistic aspect of impermanence. There is no question that Buddhism's teachings on impermanence and death are very potent and helpful when undertaken. But if one is a layperson, and especially if one is raising children, one cannot focus all the time on the negative side of impermanence. One is, in fact, focused on the constructive side of impermanence, the growth and development of one's children, and by extension, the condition of the world and society which is shaping them moment by moment. The world of interbeing, as Tai named it. Because without change, there is no growth. We could also call it interbecoming. Tai taught that the aims of Buddhism include personal happiness and well-being. This attitude is commonplace now in Western Buddhism, and that is largely due to Tai and his influence. He authored book after book talking about how to live well in this world here and now. For example, here's a book he wrote simply on the subject of anger. And it gives sage advice on how to deal with anger. In Tai's hands, mundane things became gateways to the transmundane. As a layperson, with a rich life full of perhaps a spouse or a partner, children, job, responsibilities, friends, family, community, one need not try to take time out of life for practice. Time that probably does not exist if one has young children. One can practice moment by moment in ordinary daily life. One of the first examples Tai ever gave of this was in his book, this first meditation book, Miracle of Mindfulness, which came after Vietnam, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. And that example was washing dishes. How many people have ever thought about washing dishes as Buddhist practice or mindfulness practice? But it can be. When you wash dishes, you just wash dishes. And you are attentive to the washing actions, the scrubbing, the picking up, the lifting, the touch of the water, the movement of your hand as you take the sponge or dishcloth, washing the dishes, the rinsing, the putting away. You focus on that to develop your mindfulness, apply your mindfulness. You get dishes done better that way. You don't think about other things like watching TV or plans for tomorrow or politics. Same thing with many things that I mentioned yesterday, like eating. Eat. Don't talk about or think about other things, but just do that. Another famous one is sweeping. When sweeping, just sweep. Ajahn Chah used to use this in his monastery in Thailand, where he would have monks just do nothing but sweep the monastery yard. And I knew one monk whose name was Warapanyo at that time. Now he's back to being Paul Brighter. When a little bit nuts at first sweeping, but by sweeping and being mindful about the sweeping, he learned to calm down and he learned to develop not only mindfulness, but concentration. So it can be done in how you approach everyday life. I go back to the book that I mentioned to you yesterday, Mindfulness on the Go by Jan Chosen Bays, the little book that has many, many ways of doing that in your life. Te taught that if one seeks happiness by looking for permanence, one will suffer. Therein is the problem. You're seeking happiness by trying to find something that is permanent. There is no permanence to be found. After all is change. Irrefutable, all is change. But if one seeks happiness in impermanence, one can find liberation from fear and suffering. One can find joy. So if one seeks happiness in impermanence, one can find liberation from fear and suffering. One can find joy. One can find peace. Quote, the refuge one seeks is in life, in the present moment, in the non-self and interbeing. One can smile peacefully at the ocean of impermanence. One can touch the Buddha here, end quote. When we take refuge in the Dharma, he said, we should understand that the Dharma is not the Tripitaka, the Buddhist scriptures. The real Dharma is the Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma, living, manifest Dharma. Reality as it manifests, moment by moment, here and now. This Dharmakaya manifests, and we can touch it when we calm our minds and are able to see clearly. Quote, calm is necessary for deep looking. You see interbeing, non-self, and non-death. Then non-fear, joy, and the Dharma will reveal itself to you in a very complete manner. Then you are the Dharma itself. You are the Dharma itself. This is not a matter of faith, but of practice, of taking refuge. We take refuge in each moment, which is where we find the living Dharma. Again, as Professor King further notes, this does not mean that Thai sugar-coated things. Of course, his life itself is the strongest proof of this. Growing up in an atmosphere of war, developing his understanding, his practice in the context of war, working for peace. But he also frequently challenged his students to face suffering and respond skillfully. As a teacher, when people asked him how to engage in society, how to help, his answer was, don't turn away from suffering. Stay with it. Something will occur to you to do. It is very important that you do that thing. Now, Master Yin-Shun would probably not have agreed with everything that Thai said and did, but I do believe he certainly would have approved of the vibrant and relevant Buddhism that has resulted from Thich Nhat Hanh's life work partially inspired by Master Yin-Shun. I want to comment about Thai's skill in reaching people of varying degrees of commitment or non-commitment to the Dharma. Think of 3 concentric circles. 3 circles with colors. The outer circle is in light pastels. The middle circle is in medium colors, medium intensity. The inner circle is of deep, vivid, rich colors. These represent 3 kinds of people who have read Thich Nhat Hanh's books and who have been influenced by him. The outer circle, the lighter circle of pastels, are the teachings that he has deliberately written that can apply to people who are not necessarily Buddhist, are not necessarily interested in Buddhism, who are basically looking for some pearls of wisdom, some useful advice, some good words, some general spirituality, something light and lively. The middle circle represents people who are interested in Buddhism, may have become Buddhists, or maybe only nightstand Buddhists, people who keep a Buddhist book on their nightstand by them, read it before going to bed. Maybe practice some meditation, a retreat or two. The inner circle are the deeply committed people, people who may have become monastics or dedicated, even as lay people, most of their life to Buddhist work, who are truly committed, who meditate every day, who practice meditation under Thich Nhat Hanh. To these people, Thich Nhat Hanh was like a Zen master, I am told. And then to the other people, he could also reach them. It was this ability that he had of reaching across people of various degrees of commitment, various levels of understanding that made him so influential. That is where his very similar, very simple metaphors came in, his similes. For example, among his similes is one that I use every year. You've already seen me do it in the last time I was here. And that is, I hold up a piece of paper and I ask you, what do you see in the paper? And by now you should be able to give me an answer. What do you see in this piece of paper? Anybody?
Sun in the clouds.
Yeah.
Please.
A logger who cut the tree for the paper.
Right. And you see the tree, you see the logger, you see his breakfast, all of that. This paper is made of non-paper elements, just as I, Michael, am made of non-Michael elements. And Larry is made of non-Larry elements. In other words, Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, was teaching interdependent arising, interbeing, with the simplest of forms, something that even a child can understand. He had another one, speaking of children, and that was, he once, when he was in France at, I think it was occurred at Plum Village, he was talking to a young girl, a little girl, about meditation and calming the mind, and he had a glass of cider, apple cider, and the cider had some pulp in it. And he told the girl to watch the pulp, and the pulp fell down to the bottom of the glass, leaving behind clear apple juice. And he used that as a way of using meditation to calm the mind. And the little girl immediately understood it. It was these examples that he used again and again that made it so easy to understand what he was saying. For example, in his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, he talks about a pebble. And he said, and he writes, how is one helped by the image of a pebble? Sit down in whatever position suits you the best, half lotus or lotus, back straight, half smile on your face, breathe slowly, deeply following each breath, becoming one with the breath. Then let go of everything. Okay, let go of everything. I've got to be able to turn the page. Imagine yourself as a pebble which has been thrown into a river. The pebble sinks down through the water effortlessly. Detached from everything, it falls to the shortest distance possible, finally reaching the bottom, the point of perfect rest. You are like the pebble, which has let itself fall into the river, letting go of everything. At the center of your being is your breath. You don't need to know the length of time it takes before reaching the point of complete rest on the bed of fine sand beneath the water. When you feel yourself resting like a pebble, which has reached the riverbed, that is the point when you begin to find your own rest. You are no longer pushed or pulled by anything. Very simple, very clear, concrete. He was a master of this kind of thing. So I wanted, when Thich Nhat Hanh died, to say something about him, because I have learned from him, and anybody I know who has read his books or attended his retreats or his lectures or spent time at Plum Village or anywhere else has been profoundly moved by him and changed by him. I have one friend who now lives not far from me. She also used to live in Washington, D.C. when I lived there. And she's now dying of pancreatic cancer. And she found Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, the powerful introduction to meditation practice that has served her well during her life, and especially now as her life draws to an end. And she has given away many copies of that same book to others who have been equally influenced. So that's it. That's my homage to Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, and it was one example of the influence of Master Yin-Shun, which Master Yin-Shun, I'm sure, never had any idea it would happen. Questions?
Thank you, Michael. That was really great.
Agree.
If no questions, answers.
I would tell everybody, Thich Nhat Hanh's books, it really give you a good knowledge about meditation and how to calm your mind. Even like sometimes you go to the center, that the mindful bell, it's annoying, but yet it works. I think that was a good one.
Oh yeah, I should have brought in one of my mindfulness bells. I think the mindfulness bell is been made popular because of Thai. It's been used in with other meditation groups, but its popularity is a result of his using it. And several people have several of these meditation bills around the house or at the office, just in case they need to stop for a moment. They ring the bell. He also taught using the telephone. If the telephone rings, don't answer it immediately. Let it ring 3 times. Pause. He was just full of this kind of skillful advice.
Yeah, it was annoying before you know it. And then when you go to the center, all of a sudden everybody stands still, not talking and everything. What's going on? But after a while, I think it's really good practice to ourselves.
Yeah.
Do something excited and I'll just stop doing it. Just to, your own bell in your own body or your mind or something.
In your own mind, yes.
Yeah, that's good.
I know there's someone who has a mindfulness bell app on their cell phone.
Yeah, that's good. So anybody have been in this, what you call this, in Pine Bush, Blue Cliff?
Oh yeah.
No, I've always meant to go up, but I haven't made it.
I've been to Pine Bush, and I'm going to try to go this fall for a Rebecca Lee and Simon Child retreat.
That is across the street from Pine Bush of Dharma Drum, right? Retreat center.
Well, yeah, it's all one. The meditation hall's across the street, but it's all one piece of property.
No, I mean the Dharma Drum Retreat Center is across the street. It's different. It's a different place. Blue Cliff is across the street from a retreat center, Dharma Drum. You don't know that?
I don't think so, but anyhow, last time I was there, it was all a Dharma Drum.
Yeah,
the last time I was there, it was used as a meditation room for who stayed there. So it's part of it's the same thing. It's just
you stay in the dormitories across the street, and then you go and you cross the street to meditate.
Yeah, Blue Cliff borrowed the Dharma Drum place because they don't have enough for the people.
I'm not even sure Blue Cliff is
going. You try to see it. There's across the street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Dharma Drum have more dormitory than the Blue Cliff because Blue Cliff has a lot of monastic there. Dharma Drum don't have too many because Dharma Drum, the monastic quarter is different than the visitors' quarters. Or the quarters. Yeah.
I'll have to look it up.
It's across the street, not too far from each other.
Well, it's a couple miles, but it's not exactly walking distance.
But a half a mile, not really 1/4 mile. It's not too far.
Okay.
Mhm.
Michael, could you just please cycle through the books once more? I was taking notes, so I think I missed some of
Okay,
those.
hold on just a minute.
Oh, thank you. I think he's getting more examples.
Oh yeah, because I've been there for
Needless to
many
say, I have a lot of books, but I'll
Oh,
the Vietnam Lotus in the Sea of Fire is worthy for people who are interested.
You're not too high, Michael. You cannot see the title. Put it down. Put it, yeah, that's it.
Vietnam Lotus in the Sea of Fire. It's not in print anymore, I think,
Oh,
but it might be too antiquated. Of course, the introductory book is Miracle of Mindfulness, which will have a different cover on it now. My first copy I gave away, which is why I have the second print, which has a different cover. Also, I would recommend The Heart of Understanding, which is his take
put it
on
down. Yes.
which is his take on the Heart Sutra. And it's one where he uses the white sheet of paper. It now comes in a reprint that looks like this.
That's nice.
So that's the reprint. Related to that, he also has The Other Shore, which is a completely new a different translation. He revised the translation. It's called The Other Shore. And the subtitle is A New Translation on the Heart Sutra with Commentaries. So there are two on the Heart Sutra, which ties in with what we understand is the importance of the Heart Sutra. Then he has one on anger. That's the title, Anger.
Anger, right.
Then one I liked also is, it probably has a new cover now, The Sun, My Heart, which is good for interbeing. One of the ones where he goes a little bit more deeply into Mahayana Buddhism is called Cultivating the Mind of Love. And at the end of it, he's got a very interesting discussion of the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is important for a Mahayana point of view. And then he's got several where he takes both a Pali text and the Chinese text, the Nikaya and the Agama. Several of these. One is called Our Appointment with Life. And this is the Bhattikarata Sutta in the Pali text. And I've got about 4 of these. I've got some more, but you can go to the website in Parallax Press and see what they are. And I find this is very effective for people who are getting into sutta study when he does both the Agama and the Nikaya version of the same text. And he uses that very skillfully. Then he has called The World We Have, which is the Zen approach to peace ecology. The World We Have. And there's the chanting book from Plum Village. I know that's a lot of book. I'm not sure you want to get all that.
that one I have.
That one you have. Then one of his early books was out of print for a long time, was brought back, was Zen Keys, because he is a Zen monk in the end, and Vietnamese Zen is different from Japanese, which I think is important to remember is that too many people, when thinking about Zen, they think Japanese style in a sort of semi-militaristic approach, rather than forgetting about the Korean, the Chinese, and the Vietnamese approaches. Yeah. Especially the Vietnamese is different. The Koreans are rigid, but not in the militaristic kind of way. And there are many other books. I've got a few in the bookshelf. I've got to try to find out where I put them. Does that help?
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Okay, I would suggest there is a chanting of Heart Sutra in English by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, on the YouTube. So you can get on the YouTube and put down Heart Sutra English by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Okay.
It was really easy to follow and only like about 6 minutes. So that's not the long one. It's very suiting because I think Sunhee and Emery might know why we do it in our Zoom meeting time, just to get it come down to, see, we always chanting a Heart Sutra in a liturgy, right?
Yeah.
So the English speaking people is not really know how to say the Chinese one. And I found Thich Nhat Hanh has very nice one. Very good. So this on YouTube, very easy. Heart Sutra in English.
That's very, very good.
Yeah.
I wish I still had the cassette tape, but it died, as cassette tapes do, which is one reason they were not a great technology.
Yeah.
Of Thomas Merton spending a whole hour talking about nothing but Thich Nhat Hanh,
Yeah.
using Thich Nhat Hanh as an example of a fully formed monk to his novices. It was really quite, and also here, before the pandemic, I was a volunteer in one of the prisons that is not far from where I live. You know, people like to put prisons in the countryside. And this is the Maryland Correctional Institute in Hagerstown. And Thich Nhat Hanh visited that prison before I moved here. And people who were there then still talk about it.
Wow.
But he came and made a tremendous impression on prisoners. His life, if you want more details on his life, there's a lot of full information to be found in Wikipedia under Thich Nhat Hanh, under Mindfulness Bell. Just move around the Wikipedia. There's a lot of detailed information about him and his life. He is
Michael.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm
yeah. I had a question. So where did you find the reference about the influence of Master Yin-Shun on
Sally B. King? Sally B. King, I know because of her really great book on Buddha nature. I don't know if it's still in print, but it's Buddha Nature by Sally B. King, and it's put out by the SUNY Press, State University of New York Press. She wrote an article on Thich Nhat Hanh where she mentioned that was the connection, which makes sense because
Thank you.
Thich Nhat Hanh learned Chinese, French, and English, and Pali, and he studied in Vietnam before he became very involved and was exiled from Vietnam. He studied very intensively at the University of Saigon, at the Buddhist Institute, under his teachers, and Master Yin-Shun's teachings were quite clearly being spread around East Asian Mahayana, not the Theravada. So it didn't surprise me. But I also think it's important because it takes a different twist, not just because he was a different person, but the environment in which he was living was different. It was an environment of war. And that was what he had to deal with.
Yeah, I have to mention in Vietnam, it's mostly Mahayana.
Mostly Mahayana.
It's not like Thailand and Burma.
Yeah, down in the Delta area, you got people who are ethnically Cambodian and they're Theravada.
Yes, not Vietnam. Vietnam is just like Japan and Korea and China. And Vietnam, this is Mahayana in the east.
Yeah, and it's in Vietnam that we got early Buddhist ecumenical efforts. It's in Vietnam, and largely because of the war and the oppression from the Catholics, that you got Mahayanists and Theravadins coming together in the unified Buddhist church and trying to bring some unity to the Buddhist teaching.
The Thich Nhat Hanh was exiled by the communists, just like Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
It's in a different.
But if you're interested in it, do go to the Mindfulness Bell website where you can go to all the memorial services. They're really quite interesting because when I was a monk and after I was a monk in Korea, I went to a number of memorial service, not only for my own teacher, but for other eminent monks. And the similarities and differences I found absolutely fascinating. It's very, very interesting.
How many more?
We got 1 more minute.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
When you're talking about Mahatma Gandhi and how they both had, him and Thich Nhat Hanh both had the idea of nonviolent, non-cooperation. Is what they're saying essentially the basic same thing?
Well, it's very similar. They're both peace workers, but the similarity I was drawing attention to was a saying attributed to Gandhi, which Gandhi didn't actually say, but he says something like it. And that is, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very famous. And Thich Nhat Hanh was of the same attitude.
Okay.
Okay, that you had to be peace. He had a book. One of his books is called Being Peace. So that's another good one, Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh. And that is, be the peace that you want to see.
Be at peace.
Yeah, because if you can't be it, you're never going to make it happen.
Yes.
And
you
this
can
is
draw
very
a line from Gandhi to Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Directly, because they definitely were, Martin Luther King was definitely heavily influenced by Gandhi.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It sounds like, sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It just sounds like that it involves doing and not doing, because in the case of Mahatma Gandhi, even when you're not doing, you're still doing something else. That's why you have to be that thing that you want to see. You have to be that peace.
Yeah, yeah.
So essentially, that's how it's connected, I think.
Well, what you get among these eminent peace workers, nonviolence workers, like Thomas Merton and Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi and many others, is a very similar set of attitudes and prescriptions.
Sorry.
No, anybody else? Well, if not, then Larry, I guess it's curtain time.
Okay, Larry.
All right, 3 bows to the Buddha. Bow to the teacher.
And to the participants.
We'll see you all tomorrow.
Tonight.
Tomorrow.